Welcome to Testify Podcast, where we hear what God has done and doing in the lives of people at Chapel. So this morning, we have the privilege of having Lyn with us. So fantastic. Thanks. Enjoy the series. Auntie Lyn.
Lyn.
Good morning. Pim.
Pim.
P-I-double-M.
P-I-double-M.
Yes.
Where's that from? Where's that originate from?
From my grandfather Pim, who was Irish.
Wow.
A little bit of Irish in me.
Irish, and his wife was German.
Wow.
That's my dad's mum.
Yeah. Okay. So that's but you were born in Aussie?
Yes, I was born in Queensland.
Let's go.
What a privilege.
Whereabouts in Queensland?
In Wynnum. On the
Wynnum?
bay in Wynnum.
In Wynnum.
In
Where's
Wynnum.
Brizzy.
Oh, you're
Near
On
the
the
port.
bay, near the port.
Wynnum Bay.
Wynnum, Manly,
okay.
that way.
Yep.
Wow.
Beautiful
Wynnum
area.
girl, yes.
I've never met anyone born at Wynnum, in Wynnum.
You have
Yeah.
now.
Now I have. Well, actually, I met you a long time ago. I wasn't aware of it. Is there a hospital in Wynnum?
There was a little hospital where I was born in 1947.
Oh, 47.
47. 24th the 10th, 1947.
Wow.
Coming up 77 years.
Oh,
Next
that's
month.
amazing.
Vita's born on
24.
the 25th.
Oh,
Yeah, good month.
of October.
October.
My sister's an October girl.
I'm just going to check my calendar.
So,
Yes.
siblings?
I'm the eldest of four.
Okay.
I have a sister after me. I have a brother who's now passed away a couple of years ago.
Right.
And then a younger brother.
Okay.
4 of us in 4.5 years.
Oh,
Good Catholic family.
Good case.
wow. So you were actually brought up Catholic?
Yes.
So you went to Mass every week?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So there was a God consciousness from when
Yes.
you were young?
Yes.
Okay.
You about God.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
And obviously, what was Mass like? What was your, turning up to Catholic Mass every week? Was it every week?
Every week.
Super exciting, no doubt.
We didn't have a choice. We just had to go.
Yeah, okay.
It was in Latin when
Yeah.
I first went to Mass. So
Was it?
I have no idea what he was talking about. We
And
were a
that
bit
would be
naughty.
the script from, I think it would be, everyone shares the same message from what I can
Yes,
back
yes,
then. Not sure now, but
So hang on, so you went to church.
Yes.
They spoke in Latin.
yes.
Great. Must have been fruitful for everyone.
No idea what they were talking about.
can you remember how long the Mass was? It wasn't long, was it?
About an hour.
Yeah, okay.
About an hour.
And just
Packed? Is
yes, yes. A lot of people in those days were either Catholic, Presbyterian, Methodist, or Church of England.
Right.
Mainstream churches.
so what would happen at the service?
Um,
I'm very intrigued because I don't know anything about it.
You would just go in. You had to be very respectful. You'd go in and you sit down, and they might have a choir, which my mum was part of, and they would have it sing a few hymns, a little hymn book, and we'd say a few prayers, and the priest would talk in Latin, and we'd have communion. Always had communion,
Yeah. But they served you communion.
but we went out to the altar.
Yeah.
And we had to open our mouths where the priest put a host on your tongue.
On everyone.
Yes, yes.
They served communion to you.
They serve to you.
That's a bit more than serving. That's a bit more
Yeah, you have to
helpful.
put your tongue out.
Have
The
you put
kneel,
your
I
tongue
think
out
you kneel.
and kneel?
Kneel and you put your tongue out and they put a cracker on your...
Yes, on your tongue.
your
That's
tongue.
right.
That's a bit
And then you had to walk.
Imagine you doing it.
No, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, let's do it one Sunday.
Well, we just did it because we didn't know.
Yeah. So you were, what do they call it? Confirmed or affirmed?
Oh, I
A
did.
confirmation?
We were
of your Catholic faith?
Baptised.
Christened?
They called it baptism.
Yeah.
They just sprinkle you with water
Infant
when you're a
baptism.
baby. I don't remember.
Yeah.
Then you did your Holy Communion. You did your
Confirmation.
confirmation.
Yeah, and then you are allowed to take communion after you're confirmed,
Yes.
I think, from
Yes,
what little I know.
And it would have
Yes.
been real wine, hey?
yes. You got a little titsy sip as he
Yeah.
had the chalice in his hand.
Tipsy. You got a little tipsier.
And then he drank the rest of it.
Yeah.
Did he?
He did.
The priest's job
The
is
priest's
to
job was to
finish the
finish the wine.
wine.
It was in a big golden
Goblet.
chalice. Goblet.
It's very, seems very traditional.
It is.
It is.
It is very
rabbinical.
traditional. Yeah.
So, so that was your upbringing,
Yes. And I heard about Jesus.
right?
Catholics are very conscious of the cross.
Yep.
That's a big thing, Easter. We understood that Jesus was crucified on that cross. I guess we just didn't realise it was for us personally. We knew it was for everybody, but I didn't have a personal relationship. You just love God as best you love God. Had a healthy fear of God.
Yeah.
Catholics have a reverence for God. They have a healthy fear of God.
Yeah, I see
But
that.
But it's
more,
quite distant, though, eh?
more based on the fact that you're going to be in trouble if you don't do the right thing.
Yeah, okay.
That's common.
Yeah.
So how long were you went your whole childhood
Yes.
up until
I got married at 20 in the Catholic Church,
Oh, wow.
and that was my first husband. We won't go too far into that, which I knew I shouldn't have done. He was Church of England, so he had to convert to be a Catholic to marry me.
Right.
Yes.
what did that look like for him? He had to
Well, he had to go to the priest, and he had to say that he was going to now follow the Catholic faith. That's the way it was. Yeah.
and he
crazy.
did that?
He did.
Yeah. So you're still up in Brisbane at this point?
Yes.
And so you went to a Catholic school?
No, I went to a state school for the first 8 years of my life in those days.
Yeah.
Then I went to a convent, a girls' convent, Catholic high school.
Oh, in Brisbane?
And that was one in Wynnum.
Oh, yeah.
I went there for 2 years. We had 4 years of high school in those days, 8 years in primary and 4 years in high school. And we had these lovely Sisters of Mercy who did not like me.
Not very merciful.
No. Well, there's a long story. I don't know if I should tell it maybe.
I think so.
You think so? We used to play tennis as kids, and we used to ride our push bike. And I got a lift home one time from tennis with a guy that I grew up with in primary school, but he had a mate who was driving the car. But I didn't know that that guy had just come out of jail. And he took me out they didn't take me home. They threw my push bike in the back.
Oh,
Took
wow.
me out to a farm, and there was a heap of people out there. I was about 13,
You were 13?
and I got, yes.
Oh, wow.
So I tried not to say anything. I was late home from tennis, and I just told Mum that I'd had my monthlies, that's why. But she didn't believe me. And then next thing you know, there's a knock on the door. The neighbours had seen him drive down the driveway of this farm with me and reported him to the police, and the police knocked on the door, and my dad was absolutely livid.
Yeah, as
Absolutely livid at me, more so
you.
at me.
Oh, wow.
So I heard the story many years ago that after that he wanted me out of the house.
Right,
And Mum said if she goes, the four of us go, the four kids go.
right.
And Mum went to school to these nuns and said, can you just be aware of this? I mean, it was awful. It just got pushed under the carpet. You go to the doctor and thank goodness I never got pregnant.
Wow.
I mean, I believe God had his hand on me and just protected me.
Oh, and even for the police to get involved so quickly,
Yes, no.
that's not normal. That's
But because of shame, Dad took that on as shame, and he just didn't want to know, even though him and his brothers were doing all sorts of stuff that we grew up under a a shame mentality of all their adultery and everything else going on. But Dad was furious at me, so he tried to kick me out and he gave me a terrible hiding.
Wow.
I mean, to the max, with boards off. He had a fruit shop. And it traumatised, I can't remember some of it. I honestly must have just blocked it out.
Yeah, as you do. Yep.
But my second youngest brother remembered it up until, I don't know, he was in his 60s. He said, why did Dad hit you so hard?
The hiding, right.
And I had to tell him. And Dad just lost it. But he lost it with me because I was silly enough to get into the car. So that was just all pushed under. And then Mum told the nuns at that school what had happened. And every day I got kicked out of the classroom. And I didn't know why. And Mum kept saying, what have you done, Lynette? And I said, nothing. I don't know why. So turned out Mum went to the nuns and found out. She said, I don't want her in my class. She's filthy and dirty and she'll contaminate everybody.
Wow. What the heck?
And I never found that out. And I never found out my dad tried to kick me out until probably I was in my 60s.
Oh, wow.
And Mum told me, because I said, I don't understand, because I was in high school then, teaching with a teacher's aide. And I said, oh, Mum, I don't understand why Sister Beatrice Mary was so mean to me. She said, well, I should tell you. Whoa. And I always knew there was something not right here with my dad and something not right. So Mum took my sister and I both out and took us to Leeward Hill Convent at Galloway's Hill in Brisbane. And Sister Beatrice Mary said, oh, you don't have to take Lorraine. She said, no, if you don't want my eldest daughter, you're not having the other one either. So we went there for the last couple of, I went there for the last couple of years.
Right.
So all that trauma was just pushed under because, what do you do? So when I got married at 20, I married my first boyfriend because I thought nobody else would ever want me. And I always felt, the church just, I don't know whether the church knew about that. I don't know whether Mum said anything. Mum was very involved in the Catholic Church. But I should not have married this guy. I just knew it in my spirit. But I did, and it was quite abusive. So I left a couple of years later.
So from when you were 13, with that horrendous event, to 20,
Yeah.
you're saying there's you just felt a lot of shame, a lot of...
Well, I didn't realise what it was. I just kept on going. I didn't...
Going, what do you mean?
Well, I didn't feel worthy. I didn't feel clean. I didn't feel...
And so there was no support. Did you have...
Except from Mum. My mum was
Sure.
absolutely amazing. She's probably the closest
Awesome.
person I've ever known to Jesus is my mum.
Wow.
But she didn't know what to do about it because she was dealing with Dad and his junk in the marriage.
So after the knock on the door from the police that day,
Yep.
was there any follow-up from
I
that?
don't know, but they told Dad that this guy had just got out of jail for the guy that drove the car and who lived out at the farm. Wow. So I don't know whether Dad, in those days, things were a bit dodgy. I think Dad was doing SP booking and all sorts of stuff around town. And I don't know whether he just silenced the police or whether something followed up. I don't know.
Right.
I've never found out.
So there's just this incident that's...
And you just push it aside and walk on.
Yeah, it's not pushed aside though, eh?
No, it's pushed under.
down, eh? Yeah.
And then I sort of went to a priest, when this marriage was not good, and they virtually excommunicated me in those days. Well, you've broken the covenant of marriage, sacrament of marriage, so you're out of the Catholic Church. And I said, good, great.
Wow.
Was there no, trying to walk you through it? Why?
No. They didn't have any counselling things in those days, really. People didn't know what to do with that stuff.
Yeah.
They didn't know what to do. You don't have the support you have today. And, of course, it wasn't talked about. Things in families were never talked about. They were just pushed under because people didn't know what to do to deal with them.
Wow, that's so different to now.
Yeah,
so different.
Very different. And you just got on with life and I left school. I was a shorthand typist. I got a good secretarial job.
In Brisbane?
In
All
Brisbane,
in
Brisbane, yeah. We didn't have cars. We didn't drive anywhere. We caught the bus or the train. Good job. And then it was like after this marriage, I went to live at North Stradbroke at Point Lookout and left my secretarial job. Then my father was furious at me again. And I said, no, because I needed to drop out. I felt I had nothing. I just felt, I remember sitting on the headland at Point Lookout, sitting really close to the gorge and thinking if I just move a bit further, the pain could all end here, because it was quite abusive in my first marriage. And he was committing adultery, and he'd come home late and throw the food up the wall on the plate, and not good. So I knew I had to leave. I left with $2 in my purse and went home to Mum, and then moved to the other side of town.
And when did you move to Stradbroke?
To Straddy I think I was 22 at that time.
Oh, okay.
And then I just went wild.
So you're, this might sound really bad, but you're not worthy. So,
No.
Your marriage, you're not worthy of marriage. You've been really violated. So there's this whole not worthy shame and all that. Like that's, you can sort of understand how you're feeling, like really, and God's like, you're kicked out of the church.
So that was where I knew God.
So even God's like,
He's angry at me.
yeah, okay. That's really,
God's angry at me because I broke that sacrament of marriage.
yeah.
And so I didn't know what to do. And
So you ran to Straddy.
And I went wild because I was quite protected in between that time of being up to getting married.
Yeah,
I wasn't allowed out very much.
yeah. Sort of the
Ballroom dancing, we
overcompensation.
learnt Latin American dancing. We did all that. Mum was a bit protective.
Yeah, fair enough.
Fair enough too.
Yeah.
But when I went to Straddy, I just thought, well, here we go. I just went crazy. I was just wild.
It would have been beautiful over there.
It was absolutely beautiful. In those days, there was just,
Thought.
I went to get a job. I learned hospitality there at the hotel, and I was working in one of the guest houses and just going to the surf every day, going for a surf every day, down the beach, partying on.
Wow.
I didn't really get into drugs. I did try marijuana. I didn't like being out of control.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And I wasn't really a drinker. I tried a few times and got so sick it was not worth it.
Yeah.
So, but I did party on, and then it was just like I just gave my body away
Wow.
because I thought, well, I'm looking for love in all the wrong places. So I just figured, well, maybe they'll like me.
It's fun. I just said to Sam this morning, some people, even bad love is better than no love.
Yes.
That whole thought of,
Just the fact you're accepted for that
Yeah.
time,
yeah,
and then you spat out again.
it's a
So
real trap, eh?
I went through that for I think I was over there about 2.5 years, and then I realised that, and I was just like, everyone was sleeping around and doing stuff and partying on, and I just didn't care. Hey, I just thought, well, I don't know what to do now. But I was enjoying the party lifestyle. I was enjoying
It's
that.
numbing pain, right? It's
Numbing pain,
coping.
exactly. It was just another way of killing the pain that was deep inside, which I didn't realise was so deep. And so then I thought, I don't want to live like this anymore. They're all doing drugs. They're all one of my flatmates nearly died, taking magic mushrooms, and we're all going, woo. And I thought, no, I need to go back to the mainland and get my life back together. So I got another secretarial job with a building contractor. And then I was trying to get divorced. In those days, the divorce was a long process.
Right.
It wasn't just your 12 months in between or whatever. You had to go through this big process. And I had saved money to go travelling to London, to Europe, but all my money went on getting a divorce. And so I did that. And then I thought, okay. And in between time, I just
so God's like
did what I did.
distant.
I didn't think God loved me anymore
Okay. So you're
because I was kicked out of the church. So I felt, well, even God doesn't love me.
yeah, okay. So that's just there. That's
It's just there in the
away.
background. I always believed in God.
Right.
I always believed God existed. I always believed there was a God. I thought because I'd messed up and I was always in trouble with my dad for something, whatever, always in trouble. It was always my fault. And I never understood why, but I've got to say that Dad got saved about 6 years before he passed away.
Wow.
He actually followed me to a Kenneth Copeland conference in Brisbane that I was serving with out of Lakeside, yes. And he said, now look here, dear. Yes, Dad. He said, now I'm coming out with you out to the entertainment centre. I said, okay, I got the old Holden. And I said, okay. He said the sinner's prayer every day. I gave him a leaflet. But, yeah, and I must say that God repaired that. I don't want to badmouth my dad because God showed me that he couldn't give away something he didn't have, and he didn't get that.
There is a restorative, redemptive finish there.
Well, even on his deathbed, he kicked me out of the hospital one day because he said to me...
Still kicking me out.
Yeah, he's still kicking me out. And he didn't know that I knew that Mum had told me about this, right? But I couldn't take him home. He had to stay in hospital. He had bowel cancer. He just could not go home. It's because I wouldn't take him home. He was escaping from the hospital every 5 minutes up the road on his walker. And because I wouldn't take him home, he just goes, right, get out, you're out. And I turned around and I said, now, you know what, Dad? I'm your daughter. I ain't going nowhere. And I know you tried to kick me out before, but I'm not going this time.
Wow.
And he just burst into tears.
Wow.
And he said, get out. You're out of the will. I said, couldn't care less. I said, but I'm your daughter and I'm coming back tomorrow. Wow. My parents were divorced for 30 years. Mum finally left Dad when she was about 47.
Wow.
And she couldn't take any more. Yeah. And Dad then regretted that Mum did that, even though he was still doing what he was doing. Just hurting Mum.
It's powerful, eh? Like fathers are... they have an influence, eh?
Total influence. And
it's amazing.
And because I didn't get the Father's love,
it
was hard for me to receive God's love even when I got saved.
Yeah.
Because I thought, I'm in trouble now. And it was always in trouble. And it was with Dad, with the priests, it was like... Anyhow, as I said, I'm jumping a bit ahead. Went back to the hospital. The next day, Mum's crying, even though Mum and Dad were still friends. They didn't live together, had separate houses. Mum's crying, oh, Godland, she said, look what you've done now. I said, listen, I am over getting blamed for everything in this family.
Good.
I am over it, Mum. It is not my fault that Dad's like this.
Yeah.
And she was already hurting too. She was sick. She died 2 years later.
Wow.
But I said, I'm over it. I said, and I'm going back the next day. She said, well, I'm not. I said, well, I am. And I walked in the next day and the doctor said to me, you coming back for another mouthful? Because Dad was quite loud. And I said, he's my dad.
Yeah.
And he's dying. He's my father. And I walked back in and Dad looked at me and burst into tears. I said, Dad, can we just not do this anymore? He said, I'm so sorry, dear. I always wanted my dad's approval all my life. I just wanted him to say that he was proud of me.
Yeah.
And he didn't say it till he was on his deathbed. He was nearly 85. My sister couldn't have done anything wrong, still couldn't have done anything wrong. My next brother that passed away, Dennis, he was always in trouble too. The youngest brother couldn't do anything wrong. And it was just, Dennis and I tend to cop that from Dad. Mm. Until I was saved at 47. I didn't get saved till I was 47. Wow. But in the meantime, at Stradbroke, I got again twice in between by somebody I worked with and his son, just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah.
So knife to my throat for somebody. Yeah, not good. So all that just got pushed under. There's a few more. And then I'm backtracking here. Then I had a few years in between. A few different boyfriends, didn't really want to know. They just want to use you up and spit you out. But then I just offered myself. Because I didn't have...
lost all respect for yourself.
Well, I didn't have any respect for myself. Yeah. Everything looked good on the outside. I was fit. I was healthy. I looked okay. Inside, broken.
Yeah.
And
so... You're just trying to appease that because you've got no other answers, right?
No, and you're just trying to find love in all the wrong places, you know, and all you got
Yeah.
And that's what you end up offering. Think, well, at least if I give them that, at least they'll love me for half a minute, you know?
Yeah.
And then after that you feel filthy and dirty again. And
Just compounds itself.
and even, you know, getting married in the first time in what, you know, as a bride, I still felt underneath that I was being a hypocrite and that I was tainted. But I went through with it, and I really shouldn't have gone through with that.
And now you've got divorced added to your...
And divorce added to that, which is another shame.
Yeah.
And then I had a few years in between, and then I met my second husband who had come back from Vietnam. He was a Vietnam vet.
Wow.
And he had come back from Vietnam, gone to America to work with a friend of his, come back and sort of, I think we met at a football club or something. Yeah, we did.
Were you still up in Brisbane?
Yeah, in Brisbane.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, in Brisbane.
And God was still on the outside, like just distant?
No.
Not a thought? Maybe
No,
was
I
it
got
a
into
fleeting thought every now and then, like, oh, maybe I should go to
in between,
Mass or
yes,
something?
yes. I always thought that there was a God, and I always believed in God. I just didn't think he liked me, like everybody else didn't like me.
Wow.
So there was that mindset that if everyone else doesn't like me and God's cranky with me, well, everybody and Dad's cranky with me. My mum was just beautiful, and my sister judged me. She was always Dad's little, you know, because she worked in the bank in Wynnum, and I left my secretarial job, so Dad was angry at me because all those things I see now that helped Dad feel better, I suppose, that his kids were going in the right direction.
Yeah.
My youngest brother went to uni, so he could do no wrong.
Yeah. So what's at what point's where's the turning point? Where's a seed sown that's...
Somebody must have been praying for me. I'm sure that my mum probably was.
Right.
I didn't know how to pray. I'd had these little, when I cleaned out Dad's house, I found these little prayer cards that I'd written to Jesus on the back, and I thought, you know, like little holy cards.
That you had written when
That
you
I'd
were
written
young.
something down there.
As a kid.
Wow. So I must have tapped into that somewhere. You know, there was a seed sown, I'd say, in the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
Because we heard the gospel after that, it was in English. So we heard the gospel every Sunday, really. There's seeds sown there.
Oh, when did it change to English?
I can't remember.
You were there when it changed to English, though.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
It's interesting. Yeah, hey, like being in kids' church recently, they were singing, you know, that Jesus, you are my best friend. Jesus, you are my best friend. You never heard that song?
No.
Oh, wow. Okay,
I wasn't
they
in
were playing
kids'
in kids' church recently. But when we used to do a trip to Melbourne as kids, which we didn't do very often when our family wasn't saved, when Mum and Dad were still married, I remember that song and I loved that song and I sung it, and then it was on recently.
Wow.
And talking about seeds, it was like just that little seed of that song and me singing that in whatever Sunday school I was just, I can't even remember, but little things. I just had a bit of an epiphany. I'm like, man, just the smallest things, you've got no idea how much of an impact they have. Yeah. So your little cards, when it went to, was that when it went to English?
Yes.
And this is when your dad's not well, or when your dad's passed?
No, this was as a child.
No, sorry. When you revisited those, when you found them.
When Dad had passed.
So it was after he'd passed. You were
going
through
Dad's house. Yeah.
So you're cleaning through the stuff just because you have to.
Yeah, that's right.
And you found these prayer cards.
I found these little holy cards. They had a picture on the front, and the thing is, with the Catholic Church, you ended up being in the Children of Mary. You know, the girls came into the Children of Mary, where you become like a bride to Christ. You know, like you wear a veil and you do the whole thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's another indoctrination.
Wow.
And I sort of look back and I think there was a priest who was very different to the old priests, and he came from America. And he did bit of a youth club with us, and we used to do dramas and things like that because I wasn't allowed to go out in the world after all this other business.
Yeah.
So, and then we did ballroom dancing, we did Latin American dancing, we did all that. But this priest was very different, and I always remember this Father Benedict as being very, very different. And I have an idea he may have had a bigger revelation of who Jesus was, because when Mum passed away, I found letters that Mum had written to Father Benedict, and he had replied. So he was obviously her mentor that she had confided in. And at my mum's funeral, one of my cousins, who is my mum's brother's daughter, she got saved at 18. I never knew anything about this, being saved. I never knew. And Barbara, we all grew up as kids in Wynnum. All the families, your cousins, you just grew up as kids in a good community. I had a good upbringing.
Yeah.
My dad had fruit shops. We lived in Wynnum. We went to the bay. We went fishing with Grandpop, We just swam in the bay. We had a good childhood.
Some great highlights, some great
I had
memories.
a good childhood. I can't say I didn't.
Yeah.
And but Barbara, my cousin, she got married to a pastor, and they pastored up in Brisbane, I believe, somewhere.
Right.
But I didn't know all this. But my nana, who was Mum's mum, who was very hard Irish, and she apparently pushed Mum and myself and everybody away too, even though she made out she had us every week. But Barbara, Nana used to say, Barbara's bringing that pastor guy. And I thought, who's the pastor? I didn't even know what a pastor was. Ralph, bringing that Ralph for lunch. And I thought, what's a pastor? This was years ago. But I found out my cousin at my mum's funeral, Barbara said to me, did you know that your mum used to go to the nuns at Barden in Brisbane, and they were charismatic Catholics back in the 60s. Mum used to go to those meetings. And I said, she said, yeah, we used to go. And she said, your mum was always there. I said, oh, my gosh. Mum obviously was maybe born again or maybe heard about this but wasn't discipled and didn't know where to go from that. But I found that out at Mum's funeral. And
so you were 47 when you gave your heart to Jesus.
And in between I'd got married, then got into New Age, occult, Buddhism, I was
searching, right? For
doing everything because I knew I couldn't go back to the Catholic faith because I was ousted. So what do?
And you're trying to...
Because there's a part of you that needs to find...
the medication that you're taking for the pain, right?
Yeah.
That medication's not good.
No.
For the medication as in, your relationships.
Well, there's a lot in between that. Second marriage too, and I went into all that stuff and got caught up in all that stuff.
Well, you're searching.
Searching, because there's a part of you that needs to be spiritually filled.
Yeah.
And then I got married. He got a job at Qantas as a flight attendant. We went to live in Sydney, living part-time, part single and part married, so we were both doing the wrong thing at that time because that spirit was on me, that awful thing I had come down from generational of that filthy, perverse, unclean spirit that all my dad and all my uncles and apparently my grandfather and everyone was doing that stuff in their marriage. And so started that off. Then we got married. I lived with him for 2 years and felt really wrong. I thought, no, if we don't get married, I'm out of here. And because he was broken out of a first marriage in Vietnam, two broken people come together and you bring your junk together.
Yeah, that's true.
But you're trying to do, and it wasn't always bad, that marriage. But we both did a lot of stuff and then we just partied on in Sydney. We lived in Sydney and, of course, the Qantas crew, well, there's a lot of stuff that goes on with parties and I just got into a whole lot. Worked, always had a good secretarial job, 2 jobs usually, and just loving life and living in Sydney, but something was always missing.
Something was missing.
Something was always missing and you're trying to fill it with partying, men, in bed, out of bed, work, and I was a fitness fanatic, so we did all that as well. So we got addicted to fitness, and I was really fit and healthy, but that becomes an obsession as well.
Trying to find
So
your
what
worth.
what does that U2 song say? But I still haven't found what I'm looking for.
Exactly. And I still haven't found it. And then a girlfriend, I travelled a lot overseas, which was great because I could go for 10%. I used to travel all over the world. I used to go to the Greek islands and go for $160 in the time and just go to the Greek islands and just go and drop out, you know. And I'd met a girl over there. She was part Greek and part French. And I met her in Greece one time. And we became friends for about 12 years, and then she wanted to come out to Australia to visit. So she came. This time we had moved up from Sydney and bought 8 acres at Balamble.
Oh,
And we had
Balamble?
in Balamble Valley, back of Tweed,
Okay.
back of Seagulls,
yep.
up the top, down the back of the valley.
really?
Beautiful.
8
Yeah.
acres out there.
Yeah. We had no money, but we moved up from Sydney and we just did an old farmhouse up. And I'm really creative with making stuff out of nothing, and it was very handy. And we had this lovely farmhouse. We had our horses, we had our chooks, and we had our veggie garden and the...
Sounds like what everyone's trying to have
Exactly,
these days.
exactly. And then she came out to visit, and I took her to Sydney, got her a lift down with somebody so she could see the countryside. I couldn't see this, but I went to Sydney and I stayed with a girlfriend down there. And then I sort of had some cysts and things on my ovaries over the years. I thought, oh, I need to deal with this. Went to my gynecologist down there and he said, you've got a big tumour on your uterus. And I went, oh my gosh. In the meantime, she came home to Balamble and seduced her or something in our home. And I got a phone call after 20 years of being with a phone call. And I'd stayed in Sydney a few times just to go and get the results and everything from this. He said, oh, we're going to go to Europe for 6 months. We're going to travel to Europe. I said, oh, can you just wait till I get home? No, not you and me and...
Oh, wow.
And I've gone, run that by me again.
Wow.
And I just went, oh, my gosh. Yeah. And I said, oh, okay. So I came home. Then I had to go back and have this operation. And then
So
they
you're
took
by
off.
yourself? You're pretty much by yourself?
Yeah, I was. And so they took off and went to Europe on our money, and all my free flights after I retired.
Wow.
And I just thought, and everyone could see it. My sister didn't like her. My mother didn't like her. Everyone saw it except me.
Yeah.
Everyone just saw who she was and didn't like her. And I'm thinking, why don't you like my friend? Funny about that. And so they wanted to get married.
Wow.
And so he was, because of his trauma with Vietnam, I had to be really careful with him sometimes because he had a lot of flashbacks and he would just snap. And not that he would ever hurt me, but he wouldn't do it intentionally. He used to say to me over the years, don't ever cross me. You'll end up in a box down the backyard and I'll bump you off and switch you off. And I used to go, whoops.
Oh, wow, he would say that.
Yes. He said, because what you don't understand, Lyn, is we got programmed to kill. We didn't get deprogrammed.
Yeah.
And I used to go, oh, my gosh. And I was
And you
just
didn't know
so
this,
careful.
You wouldn't have known this when you
When I was with him, I did know.
when
I first met him. No. Because he was smoking dope because he was quite cruised out.
Yeah.
And so he was trying to kill the pain of his first marriage.
Yeah. Well, everything.
Yeah.
And Vietnam.
Yeah, war.
Total traumatised. So he wanted to get married. So he said, we sold the farm, virtually gave it away. In the meantime, I got saved at 47.
So what happened?
Well, what happened was, that's a long story. I hope you got time to hear a little bit of it.
You got a bit of time?
Yeah. I want to give God the glory for healing my brokenness and coming and rescuing me, because I was sitting at the farm by myself. They'd taken off overseas. I thought, oh, now. And I was just broken. I just lied on my bed and cried, and I thought, I've just had this taken off. I'm here with all this here. They're overseas. I've got nothing now. I have got nothing.
Wow.
And then I had met, working in the Currumbin Hotel, his brother, who was Sergeant-in-Arms of the Bandidos in Sydney. Whoops, bad
Great,
dude.
another relationship.
Bad dude. And I knew him from the pub. So he came across my path and he said, "Oh, do you want to go for a drink?" And I said, "You know I don't drink." Anyhow, I thought, in the end I went, "Oh, whatever." So next thing I'm in his bed down in Tweed. And the guy's got a contract on his life, which I didn't know. Bad dude. I knew he was a bad dude. I was so low and I just hated myself so much and I had nothing. I thought, what the heck? And I wouldn't have gone there in a million years any other time, but it was just when you're that broken, you just go, well, somebody's going to take a bit of attention for me. And so next thing I'm in his bed and he's throwing his flatmate up the wall and there's a contract on his life. I found out later, but praise God, I want to give God the glory out of this. A friend of mine who was saved, I didn't know what saved was, had no idea. She came past the farm and I'm out on his Harley. He's full of it, full of drugs, full of alcohol, everything else, and I'm running around on this bloke's Harley. How I'm still sitting here is an absolute miracle. Absolute miracle. Yeah. And I know that I've been rescued. I just know that I know that I know. And Anne-Marie came past and said to her husband, Peter, "I think we need to go and visit Lyn." He said, "No, be cranky and Lyn will be at the beach." And they went down the bottom of the hill. They lived on the other side. And they turned around and came back. And I was getting ready to go bike riding and the rest of it. And Anne-Marie said, "What are you doing?" And I was like down to 47 kilos. Wow. I was never that big. I'm bigger now than I've ever been, but I was never that big. But 47 kilos is not good. Wow. Because I was eating, but I was running up the hills at Balambal, and I mean running, belting my body around. That's the only way I could kill the pain was to do the fitness thing. I didn't get into the alcohol and drugs, so we did the fitness thing. So we just built the body around. Unknowingly, that was my way to keep control of myself. Yeah, exactly. And Anne-Marie came and she said, "What are you doing?" She said, "Do you know Jesus?" And I went, And she said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Look, I've only got 5 minutes. I'm going out." She goes, "Where are you going?" And I told her. She goes, "What?" She said, "No, I don't mean," and she grew up a Catholic, "I don't mean do you know about Jesus? Do you know Jesus?" I went, no, probably not really. And I said, "Anyhow, I've got to go." She obviously went home and prayed. And then the Lord put it on my heart. I was sitting at home and I thought, she kept on at me. And I said, maybe I should. Maybe I got nothing else going. Maybe, And so she took me to a concert down in Lakeside because I wouldn't go to church. I said, "I ain't going to church. I'm wrong with God." But before that, when I was in Sydney, sorry, I'm backtracking. When I was in Sydney having all this business, the Catholic church that I lived around for 8.5 years and never graced the doors, my girlfriend that lived there, she said, "I'm going to Mass," and it was Easter time. Huh. And I said, "Oh, I might go with you." She said, "Don't be a hypocrite. I've known you 20 years, you've never been to Mass." Wow. And I said, "Geraldine, don't tell me what to do." It was my bulldog tenacity. I said, "Don't tell me what to do." And as we're talking, I'm still walking up the hill with her. And when I got there was a priest standing there and I went, "Oh, hang on, I can't go in there. I'm wrong with God." I knew that I could not go to Mass. I could not go to communion because I was wrong with God. I had that healthy fear of God that I was wrong with God and I can't do that.
But you're wrong with God, but there's no solution?
No. So I went to Mass.
There's no solution.
No, I didn't know what to do about it. So I went to Mass with her that Easter. She sat in the third front row on the side right under the cross. The cross was there. I had to look through the cross to listen to this message. Wow. My legs were like this. She said, "Are you going to go to communion?" I said, "Nope, I'm wrong with God." She goes, "Shh." I said, "Don't tell me to shush." She said, "Everyone goes to Mass at Easter." I said, "Not this everyone." Yeah. And I wouldn't go out. The next day, my other girlfriend lived the other side of the church, and as I was running up the hill to her place, that priest was in the garden doing the gardening every day, and he'd go like this, and I'd go, "Ooh, hi." Gone. So finally I went back when all this fell apart, when I got this message, I went back. And I said, maybe I need to talk to this priest. And I walked in and I said, "Look," I can't be here and I can't go to communion because, you know, I've got so much sin and I'm wrong with God. And, you know, I always remember his words. He said, God has already forgiven you. I said, he has? He said, just let's say this prayer. God has already forgiven you. I can't even remember the prayer. I was crying. And he said, go to the back of the church and get this little leaflet called Footprints. I read that and I thought, oh my gosh, you've been with me. I lost a baby in my first marriage too. That was another thing. I had a miscarriage in my first marriage. That was another thing to add to. So you've been with me when I lost a baby and I was by myself and I just got...
Been there the whole time carrying you.
And then you were with me when those people... You were with me all that time. That just broke me. But when Anne-Marie came to me when I came back to the farm, I just went, no, not going to church. She took me to a concert down at church at Lakeside. And whoever, they were Tex Morton and somebody or other from Melbourne, I still remember the band. They played a Phil Collins song and my ears went, because I went to every rock concert that moved. I was really into all the wrong stuff. And my ears went, oh. And I said, how come everybody's smiling here? Everybody's really happy.
And there's no substance, there's no...
No. And I said to Anne-Marie, these people are weird. Took me a little while, but I got into church at Lakeside. And once I got into church and this other who was still trying to harass me, I found a little Good News Bible at the op shop. I sat on my bed at the farm and I started reading through that Bible. Wow. I'd sit at the beach and read through that and I'm going, oh my gosh, because I'd given my heart to the Lord then. I'd never read a Bible till I was 47.
Wow.
Never read a Bible. Didn't have a clue what a scripture was. And it just opened up to me. I just was going like that, you know. I'm going, oh my gosh. And he showed me that he was my maker and he was my husband. You know, Isaiah. I just gone, oh my gosh. And then he showed me that I was washed as white as snow. And I've gone, oh my gosh, how can this be? And every time that rang up, full of it, 3 o'clock in the morning, I would sit on my bed and read the Psalms out to him till he got off the phone. Then I'd hang up and he'd ring back or he'd turn up. And in the end, I said to him, I went down, I was so angry one morning, I said, stop getting on my phone at 3 o'clock. I drove down. He was living just down the end of the road from Lakeside. I bashed on his door. He came at me full of it. He was ready to really hurt me behind the screen. And I stood there and I said, you can't touch me. God's my defender and my protector. And I knew, no, I don't even know where that came out of. But I just stood there, all 5'3" of me, this big man. And he said, oh, and I said, nah. And he just backed off. Wow. And I said, you're such a mongrel. I said, why don't you give your heart to the Lord and let him turn your life around? And then something came on the radio that talked about Jesus and he freaked out. He said, I've never heard that. And he said, well, if he's real, he can find my son that I left the woman in a pool of blood and blah, blah. And I said, yeah, he can do that. Total faith. I said, yeah, he can do that. And he did. He found his son in Western Australia. He gave his sister in Newcastle the phone number of that woman. Tell me how that works.
No way. Did he give his heart to
He did. Wow. And then he went down to Lakeside and he followed me everywhere. And we started working with the homeless people and doing stuff. So there's a testimony. The devil tried to take both of us out.
Yeah.
And God rescued both of us.
Yeah.
So, you know, I was 47 and I just thought, okay, Lord, well, I've got nothing happening here.
So you must have...
I'm yours.
There is this picture of just being, you know, used and abused and yourself as well choosing that, but not feeling like you've got an alternative.
Yeah, no.
This is life.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's a weird concept to think that God was there, even in those, you know, really crazy times. Yeah. What's the restorative process in healing from 47? Like you've still got your soul wounds to deal with. You've still got trust issues. You've still got
big time.
You know,
lots of stuff, lots of pain, lots of hurt, I'd lost a baby when I was 20, just after 20. That was all pushed under.
Because you still have this God is
a concept of God somewhere.
He's far away.
Yes.
How did that closeness, proximity to God shift over time, or what?
No, fairly much instantly, because I had nothing. So I just said to God, I'd given my heart to the Lord, and I just said, I have nothing. Yeah. But if you can do something with this mess, I'm yours.
And then he feel like you were
delivered me from stuff. He put a mentor with me, an older lady.
Amazing.
And she was with another church, and I can't remember, somewhere, and I was too hard for Anne in the too hard basket, so she put me onto this lady.
Did you feel like you were back on a wheel, getting on the clay wheel,
I just felt that
wheel, or?
I didn't know what I felt. I was just numb, I was numb from the pain. I was numb from the disappointments.
Yeah.
I was numb from the hatred of myself, the disrespect of myself. And when I started to read the Bible, I started to see how God was trying to show me who he was and who I was. And he gave me quick revelations of different things. And he said, and then I got mentored also in Lakeside. I used to go to every healing meeting. I used to go to Bible studies. And I was just hungry for God. There was nothing else in my life that mattered because there was nothing else. I had nothing else. Everything that I knew, everything that I thought I had was gone. So there was nothing else. So I was down to rock bottom. And I thought, well, I have nothing else. And I said, Lord, if you can do something with this mess, I'm yours. I'll serve you all the days of my life. And so I just got into it. I'm a person that's either into something or out of something. Yeah. I'm never halfway. Yeah. We don't do halfway. Yeah. So I thought, okay.
All in.
All or nothing.
All in.
And so I said.
Sold out.
Yeah, exactly. I said, okay, Lord, I've done everything hard. I've been full on into everything else. Okay, I'm going to go here. And he just changed my heart. And this lady, Zona Bentley, she's now passed away. She was so gracious. She used to come up to the farm and she was picking up in the spirit. I didn't know what spirit-filled was. I didn't have a clue. She was picking up all these things in my life and she prayed me through. I cried, I wept. She said, name that baby. And I went,
oh, wow.
She said, God's got that baby. I said, no, it was just left in the bathtub. She goes, no. That was by myself. And she goes, no, God's got that baby. And I couldn't touch this stuff. I just
shoved it down.
And pretended it didn't ever happen. If anyone said, have you got any children? I go, no.
Yeah.
Now I correct myself and say, yes, I have. I got one in heaven.
Yeah.
And I had a stepson part-time out of my second marriage.
Right.
But I don't have a relationship with him now. And I just went full on for God. I thought, I have got nothing else, so let's go. I said, okay, if you said you're my provider, Lord, I need a job. I'm not going back to hospitality. I'm not going back in the clubs. I worked in nightclubs and stuff. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
And I played in nightclubs, and I never ever wanted to. God just took stuff away from me.
Yeah.
He took that filthy thing away from me, just delivered me. And I didn't understand what it was at the time, that I just didn't have that desire anymore. And I said, I don't want to feel like that anymore. I don't want men around me.
Yeah, not in the sense of a man hater. I don't want men around anymore. It's you want to be devoted.
I had a love-hate relationship with men.
Yeah.
And I was hurt by so many people, right from my father down. And so I just didn't want to go there. And I just said, I'm yours. And just, I'm yours and I don't know what to do. So it was just totally,
I love that.
I'm yours, I don't know what to do.
So, in wrapping it up, hope came alive, right?
Yeah, something came alive in my heart that I never knew before.
What would you say just to someone who maybe feel like they're offside with God, they're hopeless, everything's suppressed, they don't want to say anything? What's a word or something that you can encourage them with?
Nothing is too hard for God to fix.
Wow.
Nothing is too damaged. Nothing is too far past being restored. And for nearly 30 years now, I asked God to keep me celibate. I have no desire. And I said, if this is your will, but if you want me to be with someone, I'm not looking. But I said, I just want to be yours.
Wow.
And I've just wanted to go full on for God. And God has brought me through so much that I can now trust people.
Yeah.
I can trust men. I can hug my brothers in Christ without them coming near me and I'm thinking, what do you want? And I can, it's been a long journey and I had to learn to love God and understand who God, my Father, who's loved me all along. But I didn't know that because I was told differently. But I know that God loves me. I know Jesus loves me, and I know that the Holy Spirit lives in me, and I walk with him every day. And whatever comes up, and there's been lots of trials over the years, lots, but he's brought me through.
That's awesome.
And he's still bringing me through, and I am just on fire for God inside. I don't have any desire for anything but God.
That's awesome.
and the things of the kingdom.
Yeah, and we can see that in your life and the way you walk and the things you put your time towards, and it's amazing. That's a great note to wrap up on, Lyn. But,
Nothing's too hard.
Powerful. Nothing's too hard for God. Nothing's too damaged.
You're never too damaged. You're never too broken, and you're never too far away from God that he can't find you in your brokenness.
Love that.
And in your lowest moment, he will come. When you cry out, he will come.
That's awesome. Thank you, Lyn.
Thanks, Lyn.
Thanks for sharing.
Thanks for your time.
You're welcome.
Awesome.
I hope it maybe helps somebody else.